Welcome to ShiftWatch. I'm your host, Starbuck. In this episode, the more the topic of CLPT, CLPF, continuous light pulse transmissions of continuous light pulse frequencies is being presented, the more interest in David Wallace sharing what he knows about the topic grows. Perhaps now you should start paying attention, eh? Next, first, a quick update from Ben Davidson describing the current geomagnetic storm levels we've been experiencing and how the effects on our planet are growing in severity. More evidence of the deteriorating magnetic field that had been protecting Earth. And understanding the real-time effects of solar activity on our planet. Dr. Tamitha Skov explains her expectations and shows us the technology she uses to form her conclusions. Then, if you'd like to understand what a telomere is, I have some perspective to offer. Here is a video capture of this phenomenon. Get used to this kind of contact when you are vibrating at their level. And finally, the full story of the Akashic records, accessing your Akashic records and understanding the nature of karma. Here's where we can begin to grasp that our lessons were not obstacles, they are activations.
But Dave and I have been going back and forth since the very first time he ever mentioned the phrase CLPT and CLPF. And I had a fundamental understanding of what that kind of light influence was. I just want to dig deeper into it for myself. And so although, since then I have a greater comprehension of it, I really want to hear from Dave himself and expand on this. Over the last few weeks, there have been new tribes that have shown up, that have seen these blinking lights. And every time I hear it again, I'm convinced that they're having real communication with some other entity, something higher than themselves. And this is indicative of what Dave has been describing. So I want really Dave to help others understand more about that, because when they see those lights in the sky and they think that they're communicating them, that's exactly what's taking place. So having said that, Dave, please expand my base of understanding and help others understand it as well. Because when you told me about it, it resonated with me totally. And I really want it to sink in some more.
Okay. Thank you, Lowell. It's a pleasure to be here. It's nice to see everybody looking so well. When Lowell and I were talking briefly yesterday and decided to do this, there's some things that came up first before we were going to talk about CLPT. And one of them is just terminology that all of us use. And it's interesting, like if you want to talk about the fourth dimension or the fifth dimension, all the way up to 11, 12, or 88 or 8 million, doesn't really matter. There's no cap on that. There really isn't. There's a shared simplicity in everything in the design of the universe. And without one thought turning into another, I wanted to bring up this simple observation first before we talk about continuous light pulse technologies and how we receive that information. So if someone's talking about the fourth or fifth dimension, what about people that mention it as the fourth or fifth density? Okay, so you have people that use the word dimension, you have people that use the word density. Now, density within tribe may have 4 or 5 meanings to some people, maybe 10, or it may be an extrapolate from your own personal experiences, but there's no lexicon to the terminology that we use. There's no encyclopedia. With all the stuff they've given me, I would love to sit down and write some kind of lexicon or some sort of book out that says, ascension. It's not just a balloon going up, it's blah, blah, blah. So, and overwrought words. When we want to talk about science, people oftentimes use the word electromagnetism without really considering the functions of electromagnetism and how it works in physics or in reality. But I'm not sure about the word density, so you'll never hear me using it. And then the other one was light language. This is a very important term because light language can mean many things, and it means many things for many different people. A friend of mine who is a specialist in sacred geometry, she talks about light language as a means to both communicate with the light, the spiritual light that's generated by your thoughts, to higher beings that also communicate in light. And then there's the light language that someone like Alec Collier mentioned. When we saw Alex Collier up in Shasta a year and a half ago, I had a moment to speak to him, and he was talking about Andromedeans have this ability to flash lights just right sort of emanating from their upper forehead or their frontal lobe, and they flash these lights, and they can read these lights because they're what are also called light packages. And light packages have several different meanings in this reality as far as mainstream science, but you guys have heard me talk about encoding many pieces of information into a package of light. So for me, a light package is a highly detailed, highly compressed, understandable construct of many pieces of information that are put into the form of light and then sent to you. And you can either receive them if you have higher telekinesis and psychic abilities like Andromedeans, and you can receive them like a flash of light and immediately you understand what the thought is. Or you can use the device that they showed me that we did the diagrams on in the 4-part series, and you can send a light package that way, and you can anneal symbols to excited atoms and turn them into a static light object and send it. Light packages can be something that we receive from a ship. It can be something that we receive from a spiritual entity, and they can be things that we're not aware of. So when I talk about light packages, I'm always referring to CLPF and CLPT and the language of communication that I was shown whilst I was being invited to become a Tauran ambassador.
Good morning, folks. Welcome, observers. Today we're going to be going over the level 4 solar storm that happened yesterday for absolutely no good reason. We've got 3 other links to hit and an outlook for the paper of the year, which we're going to cover tomorrow. But we're starting with the last 24 hours on our star, and we find that the satellite calibration jitters were about the only thing to see up there. Solar flaring and eruptive activity took a little break, but we've got potential along with a possible coronal hole interaction coming. Let's begin with where we started yesterday. The CME impact had occurred and it drove level 2 storms initially. But then in the wake of the CME, the magnetic field of the solar wind whipped around and Earth's magnetic field just couldn't take another twist. Level 4 geomagnetic storm. Absolutely ridiculous. Luckily, it was just localized and regional issues technologically. A few satellite orbits degraded. There was a 3x increase in electrical fires, which is actually lower than normal. Zoom went down worldwide at the exact moment the field whipped. But it's not what happened technologically yesterday that is scary. It's what the event implies. Once again, for about the 50th time in the last 3 years, the solar storm levels are far outpacing what should happen based on the impacts Earth is taking. These signal the continued collapse of the magnetic field strength as the ongoing excursion of our planet leads us to the next stage of Earth. Folks, tomorrow we're going to hit a paper on that topic and how bad the Lachamp event really was 4 cycles ago. If you are impatient, you can track it down here. Folks, what we're in for is going to make what they call climate change look like a picnic. In what we're watching on our star the rest of the week, these sunspots are incoming and with just a touch of development could begin releasing big flares anytime. In the solar wind, it may be just 3 or 4 days until we're back in storm conditions if the stream from that southern coronal hole hits us. We're eyes open for all of it. Folks, I am not yet ready to definitively call the Puerto Rico blackout as a solar effect, but I'm going to admit they're running out of explanations as one by one gets crossed off the list. Even solar scientists in the official category are saying, yes, this was probably the sun. And yes, it did indeed hit exactly when the solar storm did, and in the exact way you would expect. I'll say this. That solar storm should not have even been a G4 event, and if the sun really did this, we are not going to make it through solar cycle 26. Hope you understand.
Looking at radio blackouts, you amateur radio operators have been dealing with some decent R1 level radio blackouts and some decent noise on the dayside radio bands easily over the last week or so, but things are finally beginning to quiet down. But you've been dealing with, you can see pops there reaching up to about 25, almost 30 megahertz. So sadly, that's been a lot of noise to deal with, but things are finally calming down just a little bit as we lose region 4055 and 4058 to the sun's far side. Now, as we take a look at our ovation model, well, Aurora has been giving us some fun stuff here over the last week, but things are finally beginning to calm back down. We're kind of getting back down into the green here, and that means that Aurora is kind of retreating back to higher latitudes and really kind of dimming out a little bit. But it doesn't mean that we haven't gotten some interesting effects because of it, especially back on the 5th, we get these substorm effects. And looking at the wide angle augmentation system, this is precision GPS, we actually had back on the 4th and in the 5th, really interesting outages that just kind of were localized. So any of you frequent flyers and you air crew that were flying over the Canadian provinces on the 4th and in the 5th early morning hours, you might have actually noticed some outages or some problems with your reception for GPS. And that's likely going to continue when we have these bigger storms. So be on the alert for that. And now as we switch to our ROTI map, you'll see here we've actually kind of calmed down. We had been getting a lot of this potential for scintillation up at the high latitudes, but with the aurora calming down, that's getting a lot better. Now it's just kind of localized hot spots, especially on the night side, but not too badly. We're seeing here's a couple on the day side too, and that's going to continue again over the next 24 hours until that big solar storm hits, and then likely we're going to start getting the scintillation risk back at high latitudes for GPS and GNSS. So you drone pilots, be sure to stay vigilant. And now switching to our solar storm conditions and aurora possibilities over the coming week, we are anticipating the hit from that triple threat of storms that are on their way to Earth. At high latitudes, NOAA is expecting major to possibly severe storms. That's at a G2 to a G3 level, with up to about a 75% chance of that G3 level hitting right around the 16th. That's when things should peak. Then things should calm down a little bit by the 17th. But then by the 18th, we're going to be on a wind watch because we do have some pocket of fast solar wind that could be hitting us. After that, however, things will calm down for just a little bit, and then we'll get some fast solar wind as we move into next week as well. So a lot of good chances for your aurora photographers. At mid-latitudes, well, we're still expecting minor storm conditions, and we have up to about a 60% chance of a major storm as the storms peak on the 16th. And then things should calm down pretty quickly after that, going to maybe active conditions while we look for some pockets of fast solar wind. Might get a little bit of aurora out of that. It's kind of hard to tell. But then we may have to wait until next week, possibly around the 21st or so, before we get another big chance for aurora from big solar storming. So we'll have to just see how that goes. But this should definitely give you guys some good chances to get some decent shows over the next couple days. And now switching to our solar flare and dayside radio blackout outlook over the coming week. We are well into the triple digits for solar flux, and this does mean that we've got good radio propagation on Earth's dayside. However, we're also sitting at the severe noise level. NOAA is giving us about a 75% chance of M-class flares at an R1 to R2 level radio blackout and about a 10 to 15% chance of X-class flares at an R3 level radio blackout. Luckily, this is going to calm down just a little bit as region 4055 and 4058 continue to rotate to the sun's far side. But we do have those new regions that are going to be rotating into Earth view, so don't be surprised if some of this noise starts creeping back up here in about 3 to 5 days. Expecting the radio blackouts to continue. So amateur radio operators and emergency responders, you're just going to have to hang on because the noise isn't going away.
You didn't come here empty. You didn't arrive on this planet as a blank slate, randomly thrown into a chaotic world. You came with a blueprint, a soul-level design shaped by lifetimes of experience, intention, and consequence. Akashic records hold that blueprint. They don't just contain information about who you've been, they map out the energetic residue of those experiences, what some call karma, what others call soul memory, but what is, at its core, the spiritual architecture of your evolution. Karma has been misunderstood by many. It's not punishment. It's not cosmic retribution for doing something wrong. Karma is memory. It's momentum. It's energy echoing forward, seeking resolution, balance, and growth. Think of it as an unfinished chord that needs to be completed. If you betrayed someone in one life, you may feel a deep need to protect others in this one. If you silenced your truth for years, you might now feel compelled to speak, even if your voice shakes. These aren't random traits. They're threads, emotional and energetic patterns woven through lifetimes, creating continuity in your soul's story. And then there are soul contracts. These are not rigid scripts, but agreements made at the soul level before incarnation, arrangements to meet certain people, face particular challenges, or experience specific lessons. That toxic relationship, that impossible parent, that mentor who appeared at just the right time. These aren't always accidents. They may be part of a deeper contract, a mutual agreement to catalyze growth in each other, no matter how difficult the process. The Akashic records allow us to glimpse these contracts, not so we can escape the pain, but so we can understand its purpose. This is why the records are not just repositories of information. They are mirrors of transformation. When you access your soul's blueprint, you begin to see your struggles differently. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this teaching me?" You begin to notice the repeating cycles, the same lesson showing up in different disguises, the same kind of heartbreak, the same fear, the same self-sabotage. And when you see the pattern, you gain the power to rewrite it. Because awareness breaks the cycle, and choice, once made with full consciousness, becomes the seed of transformation. There's also something sacred about seeing your gifts through the lens of the records. We often focus on wounds when we talk about past lives, but wisdom travels too. Talents, strengths, even spiritual abilities can cross over. That inexplicable pull toward healing, teaching, or creating. It might not be new. It might be something your soul has been mastering for lifetimes. And the records help you remember not only where the pain started, but where the power lives. Understanding your soul blueprint also dissolves comparison. Because once you realize everyone is on a unique evolutionary path, the need to match someone else's timeline disappears. You begin to honor your own process. You stop rushing. You stop blaming. You start trusting that your challenges are not obstacles, they are activations. The Akashic records reveal the soul's curriculum, and once you see that, even your biggest setbacks begin to feel like sacred assignments. But the most liberating truth of all? Your blueprint is fluid. The past may shape the present, but it doesn't trap it. Karma is not a life sentence. Soul contracts can be rewritten. Patterns can be broken. This is not about determinism, it's about awareness. The records don't chain you to a fate. They offer you a map, but you still choose the path. You still carry the pen. And in every moment, you are either repeating an old pattern or initiating a new cycle entirely. So when you ask, "What is my purpose?" you're not waiting for the answer to descend from the sky. You're being invited to remember what your soul already knows. The blueprint has always been inside you. The records are simply the key to decoding it.